Thank you for choosing to join my talk. I hope you will not regret that. I know that I'm the only person standing between you and the upcoming lunch, so it's not the best spot to be in, but I hope I'll help you to cut this time down. So my name is Denis Salnikov, and today we're going to talk about team self-design, as the slides you can see behind my back say, precisely about benefits and side effects. But before talking about benefits and side effects, we need to talk about what it is at all. A few words about myself. So I'm a Scrum Master since 2014, based in Kraków, Poland. Like 5-6 hour drive from here. Very beautiful place. Come to us if you are looking for another city to fight with Prague for the first place in beauty contest. And I combine several occupations as of now. So I work as a head of Agile practices in a company called PandaDoc. This is a e-sign unicorn startup, US-based startup, which is providing the software as a service solution for document workflow automation e-signature. I'm also a trainer and consultant together with my partners in the company called Coactors, and I'm a less and organizational design consultant in my self-employment called Agile Expat. And over the last 6 years, I've been able to help few companies, mostly product startups based in Europe, and some of them were based outside Europe as well. And the cases I'm going to share today are coming from their practice as well. So why this conversation is important? Because I feel that we are currently living in a time when we tend to understand more and more why engagement matters, why engagement in the workplace matters. After the pandemic and all these challenging times, we faced the wave of so-called quiet quitting, which many people argue is the thing which was there since forever, but it's just a new fancy term. But anyway, the main reason for quiet quitting is people being actively disengaged or not engaged about the work they do. And according to Gallup and Workday scientific researches, there are quite some people actively disengaged or not engaged, which means that they actually don't care about the work they do. And when we talk about engagement, I usually fall back to the book which I read a long time ago called Drive by Daniel Pink, where he describes how motivation works and what are the pillars that combined together create motivation amongst the workforce. And what's important, he specifically focuses on the topic of intrinsic motivation, so the one which comes from within. So according to Mr. Pink, when we are talking about intellectual activity, like the software creation, like design creation, like creating some new products or creating innovations, the intrinsic motivation beats extrinsic motivation. And the reason for that is that, okay, you can pay a person more, but they will not become more creative because of like their raised paycheck. They can start spending a little bit more hours at their workplace, but after some time this will just go down and they will fall back to the previous behavior. And according to Mr. Pink, whose book is based on different scientific researchers, the drive, the intrinsic motivation is based upon 3 pillars: the autonomy, the purpose, and the mastery. So whether I'm able to decide how to do things, whether I have a clear, strong understanding why I'm doing certain things, and whether I can improve my skills while I'm doing these things. So this is about motivation and engagement and why this topic is important. Let's now deep dive into the topic of self-design. Before talking about how to organize the self-design in your company, it's important to understand what's the difference between self-organizing teams we often talk about and self-designing teams. Self-organizing teams is the term we probably all know, and this is probably one of not many things that Kanban and Scrum community agree upon, that if you want to get good results, you need to create an environment where people can self-organize around the work they do, either in teams or in streams of work, and this will deliver the best result. You can find self-organization being mentioned in the very first edition of Scrum Guide. You can find the self-organization being mentioned in the Essential Kanban Condensed book, which was the first book describing Kanban applied to intellectual activity. And this is not surprising because both of these documents, they rely on the longer scientific idea that was described in the new product development game white paper by Drs. Takeuchi and Nanaka, who were exploring the secret behind Japanese companies' success in the after the Second World War. And in that white paper, which you can still find online in, I think it's Harvard Business Review, right? You can read, you can see where the term Scrum comes for the first time in play, but you can also learn about these 6 factors they've defined as important for innovation. And one of these factors was self-organizing project teams. Another one was built-in organizational instability. So, according to a shared definition, when we talk about self-organizing or self-managing teams, we mean that these are the teams that first do the work themselves, second are taking care of tracking their progress, identifying the way how to get work done, and how to assess their progress themselves. This is, I think, very common understanding of what the self-organized team is. But in this matrix you see, which is originating from another book I will mention later, we have a description of different levels of teams, depending on their independence from a management or dependence on the management. And as we see, there are not only manager-led and self-managing teams, but there are also self-designing teams and self-governing teams, which go, let's say, 1 or 2 steps beyond the self-designed teams in the accountabilities they take care of. So according, and yeah, there is my old talk on how to work with, how to help teams become self-organized. So if you want to check this out after this talk, you can always scan this QR code and access it. It's from 2018, I guess. Good start, yeah. So the book I was mentioning is by J. Richard Hackman called Leading Teams, Setting the Stage for Great Performances. And this is the book from like end of 80s, early 90s, where he describes this model and where he specifically describes what self-designing teams are. According to Mr. Hackman, self-designing teams have the authority to decide who is on their team, so what is the design of the team, and what work this team addresses, so what is the purpose of this team. And they have full authority to make such decisions without any external manager support. So yeah, getting back to this matrix, we are talking about this level. What are the traits of self-designing teams? So self-designing teams, they can define or modify its design, meaning that they can choose people who are on the team or who are not on the team. They can define or adapt required skill set based on the work they expected to do. And they can also hire and fire people too from the team. And this is very in line with what Scrum Guide tells us, because in Scrum Guide we say that developers are accountable for holding each other as professionals. So firing, unfortunately, is part of that sometimes. The other important half is defining or modifying its organizational context. It means that self-designed team can choose which part of the organization to join or to which part of the organization to move. And they can choose the business objectives they're pursuing or what feature they are developing in order to pursue that business objective. And to make it more, let's say, something you can rely to, I will bring more examples later as we go. But for now, we have a definition of self-designing teams. So these are the teams that can not only do the work and track the progress themselves, but can also define who is on the team and can define what are the things they're working on. So how to introduce self-design in your organization? There are 3 introduction scenarios which I have seen in my experience, and they are quite different, but there is one thing that merges them together that most probably it will require a thing called self-design workshop. And I will also provide you with a scenario for such workshop in case you decide to run one in your company. These gentlemen, Craig Larman and Bas Voddy, one of whom will be delivering an opening keynote tomorrow morning. Highly advise you to attend it. It's very interesting. They, in their book about large-scale product development, they talk about the importance of volunteering. And volunteering is exactly what we mean when we say that people can choose which team to join or which feature to develop or which goal to pursue. So They say that true volunteering is a powerful way of engaging people's minds and souls, but unfortunately it's often gets underused, most likely because managers feel that they will be losing power, and real volunteering is very engaging for people. So one scenario when to introduce self-design to a company is when your company is facing some critical urgency. And there are usually when there are critical urgency that arise, like sudden regulatory requirement, sudden change you need to make in your big microservice or something like that, there are two ways you can do, at least two ways that Mr. Kensback describes. You can either assign this work to people you treat as more suitable to do this work, or you can let people sign up for this work, meaning that you lay out like the things need to be done on the table, you describe the urgency of that thing, and what are the details of the task you see, and you let people from some pool of your talents choose whether to sign up for that task or not. I've seen this done many times, and I will tell one story. So once I was working in a company based in Germany, and we were exactly in a scenario when we faced a sudden regulatory requirements, which were potentially blocking us from further development. Our management had the same choice, either to assign people to this task or to let people choose themselves. It was like 3 or 4 months since we started applying Scrum, and like we were already scaling it, so we had several teams which were working quite well. People were collaborating, and like they were delivering some potentially shippable work in increment by the end of almost every sprint, let's be honest. And like, yeah, there was some sense of team game building up. But then when this regulatory requirement arrived, the management started thinking, okay, what should we do? We have this deadline in 3 months. If we don't fulfill it, then the regulator can switch us off, and we need to get this done. So what they did, they came together, they drafted the delivery plan themselves, and they said, okay, so this is a delivery plan, and to get this delivery done, we probably need this, and that person from these 2 teams. They came to the sprint review as usual without any upfront notification, waited until the end of the sprint review, and then told, okay, folks, thank you for this sprint review. We are very happy to see the results of your work. But unfortunately, starting from the next sprint, like you 3 will not be part of your teams anymore. You will go to another team which will get this regulatory requirement done. And I really like this comics, which really describes the idea behind that people being managers first sell the idea of self-organizing teams, and then they say that they will micromanage teams because self-organizing teams are impossible and people cannot organize themselves. So how it ended up in this story? It ended up, first of all, we didn't deliver the regulatory requirements on time. It was 1 month late, but we somehow managed to negotiate it with the regulator. But another thing is that those 3 people, they left the company after that project got delivered. And we've lost people who were bearing in mind very important critical knowledge of the fundamentals of the products we've been developing, because they were there since the very beginning. And I see, based on talks with them, based on the exit interviews, I saw specific patterns which reproduced many times in the future in some other situations. So first of all, people were left out of autonomy because they had no choice whom to work with, they had no choice what work to agree on, and they didn't even had an opportunity to agree whether to join this team or not. They were just said that this is the fact, you are joining this team starting from tomorrow. Second, they were not provided with any clear purpose. Probably, given how critical and urgent those requirements were, if somebody would spend more time describing them why this is important, they would react differently, or they would volunteer for that. And one person explicitly told me that if they would do it differently, I would volunteer for that project myself, but like, they did it as they did it. And the most interesting part was when I asked them, okay, but what stopped us from delivering on time? Was the forecast from the managers wrong since the very beginning or something else? And what they told us, or at least what I understood from their words, was that being left out of autonomy and purpose, they decided to, let's say, extra compensate on the mastery side. So they decided to overcomplicate or maybe unnecessarily complicate the technical solution they came up with. They wanted to prove some new technologies there. They wanted to try out some new ideas about architecture there. And as a result, they delivered it 1 month later. And yeah, so this was the first time when I started to think that, okay, maybe something is wrong with this assignment thing and we need to approach it differently. So yeah, next time when you have such situation, try at least make managers consider letting people sign up for this work, because 3 months later when people start leaving or something else, I don't know, ENPS declines or something else bad happens, like the only thing they can complain about is their own decisions, because all problems of today come from yesterday's solutions, as Peter Sinch says. Yeah, and sometimes in these cases, managers try to sweeten the pill. They come up with some fancy rules or names for these teams. Maybe you even know the term Tiger Team, which is very popular in the American community, which is basically this team which is brought together to address something quickly and then dispersed. And in this comics, once again, Dilbert Boss makes jokes about tiger costumes for the Tiger Team. So yeah, this is the first case, critical urgency. Another case which I'm currently still experiencing, and I'm experiencing it over the last 2.5 years, is the organizational growth. So when the company is getting bigger and you need to somehow identify the way to organize these people in a new structure that would support their performance. So yeah, very often in these situations, people manage by spreadsheets. So managers have some FTEs or like headcount they can hire. They decide, okay, so we'll have 5 Java developers next quarter and 3 Python developers. So we will create 3 teams out of them. And then this person will go there and this person will go there. They do basically the same thing like that manager did in that situation. Once again, no autonomy left for the people. And the other way to approach this is to have a thing we call self-design workshop. So this is basically a workshop, a facilitated event, which aims to create teams around certain requirements and around certain limitations, but let people choose how to create those teams. So in order to run self-design workshop, you need 4 important steps. And the first step is to, first of all, understand, of course, what is the scope of that change. So how many people you want to get involved in that? Is it the whole organization? Is it some part of organization? Is it some department? Or maybe you are just willing to split one big Scrum team into 2 smaller teams. I had these situations as well. And in order to make it happen, you need to have a clear answers to questions why we are doing this. So here are some questions to consider when preparing such a workshop. And these are the questions that not always people ask, but whenever they hear answers to these questions, it usually helps to create some sense of urgency in their minds. Why this is important, why it should happen, and why it should happen exactly now. And then, of course, this goal and purpose should be delivered, and ideally it should be delivered by the very top people who are involved in that. If you are making a change in the tribe, then this should be some, I don't know, engineering manager of the tribe. If you're making a change in the whole startup, this should be co-founders of the company and like CEO, CTO, CPO, whoever you have. Second step is to provide clear guidelines and define constraints. So as usual, as when we are facilitating some event, we want to provide people with some clear structure so that they could focus on the content. And in our case, it's not only about what are format we are using and how much time you have, but also some limitations about the teams they need to create. So how many teams we want to have, what's the ideal size of the team, what's the skill set of an ideal team. Should all teams be like totally cross-functional? So I don't know, have Java, Python, front-end, iOS, Android in the single team. Or maybe some of them can be component teams, some of them be cross-functional feature teams. That's also to be decided. And other things you can see on the screen. And ideally, as in any facilitation, is to make such things visible and clear upfront. So this is why you need to prepare the space if it's happening offline, or you need to prepare some space in Miro or Mural if you're using online, and to brief people on what will be happening now. And then let self-design happen. And believe me, like, it sounds like magic, and most likely it won't happen perfectly from the first time, but you will need to repeat it several times. We'll talk about it later. So as soon as you have clear goal and purpose, and as soon as you have clear guidelines and limitations, people can start acting based on the input they've been given. And for that, like, they need some clear stations they need to join. So these can be separate Miro boards in online environment, or separate like flip charts in a big room like that. This should be some way they can visualize their skills. Ideally, we want each person to have some badge where they like have some color coding describing their skill set. And each station will have some skill metrics where people can come together, apply their color coding, and see, okay, are we matching the ideal state of the team skill set or not? And provide enough space and observe the dynamics. It can be also done online, and here's the first example from PandaDoc. So this is the self-design workshop we've done online when splitting one big team with newcomers into 3 Scrum teams. So as you can see here, we've first collected questions people had and tried to ask those questions, so to clarify what's expected from them. Then we also had voting done together with them, describing 2 potential states we want to create. So one was with 2 completely cross-functional teams, another one with 1 functional and 2 cross-functional teams. And we let people vote because we had a high trust to our developers, and we wanted for their voice to be heard, once again, to raise their engagement. And in the end, we asked people to, like, having those ideal state of the team, we asked them to move around their avatars to describe, okay, who will join which team. We created breakout rooms for those people, and they had some time to have a conversation there. I will later share the QR code for the facilitation plan of such sessions, so don't worry, this will be more clear when you read the article. Yeah, and as I said, it will probably not work perfectly since the very first attempt, because people are new to this attitude and they need to get acquainted. So you will most likely need to review interim results and repeat the step number 3. So how this may look like. So you already had some limitations and rules in mind, but there is also some context you have that people might be missing. For example, like how these or that people are working together, or whether they are like introverts or extroverts, etc. Maybe the team is too big, or maybe some team is missing a crucial skill set. So you and other people participating, like engineering managers or, I don't know, product managers, can walk around between the stations of these newly formed teams and challenge them. So ask them, okay, so you don't have a Java developer in that team. Like, what you gonna do if, like, we have incoming Java tasks? Like, we foresee Java tasks coming up again and again. So how you will help to the rest of the organization in such situation? And yeah, this will probably require additional 2-3 iterations before you end up with perfect teams. Another thing we did when doing this is, in the end, when these teams were formed, we also had them make interviews with the Scrum Masters, who were presenting themselves, and the teams were choosing which Scrum Masters they want to work with. So this is maybe another way to bring it one step forward. And why it's important and how does it work? So when I'm teaching the team facilitation classes, I always fall back to this idea from Mike Wilkinson that any effective decision, it combines 2 important parts. It's not only the right decision, how right the decision, whether it's right or wrong, but also what is the level of commitment to this decision. And sometimes it's better to take not perfect decision, but with the high commitment of a group, than to make everyone agree on the best decision, which nobody will follow. Talking about self-design, my colleague from training company has a perfect example when they were coaching one company and they helped them to deliver a self-design workshop. And next day, when they came to the office, the manager asked them to come in the room and told them, so we are very happy about the results of the workshop, but there was one developer who we needed to move between teams because like he was not in the right place. We moved him into other team, and yeah, he will be in a different team. So what has been happening ever since for the next 6 months, whenever something was going wrong, like sprint goal not achieved, I don't know, some bug arose in the production or something like that, The team that lost the developer was saying that it's because this developer has been taken away from them, and the team that got this developer said that this is because of that developer, because they didn't ask for that developer. So if you are not ready to follow on your promises, or your management is not ready to follow on your promises, it's better to abstain from such experiments at all. Yeah, and here is the link to the example of self-design workshop. Don't worry, this is not YouTube this time, so there will be no sound coming from your phone. Yeah, and I bet the organizers will also share my slides afterwards, so if you are sitting too far and you can't scan the QR code, don't worry. You'll still be able to access it. One last story, which is more like, to inspire you, is the transformation of an organization as a whole, or a bigger part of organization. This is the place where you can apply self-design as well. Yeah, so let's skip it to save some time. What if I told you can self-design the whole company? I have at least 2 or 3 cases in my experience where this was done. One of them is, again, PandaDoc. So when PandaDoc grew big, when we had already 12 or even 14 teams, we understood that we need to switch from a classical less framework where we have many teams serving single product backlog to less huge, where we have multiple requirement areas. Each requirement area have single product backlog, but there are multiple teams working on that backlog. And we spent some time defining, okay, what should be the logic behind those requirement areas, what will be the purpose, and what would be the metrics those requirement areas will focus on. And then we had an online session where directors of those requirement areas pitched their directions. We also had limitations about how many teams we need to have there, should it be component or cross-functional teams. And then teams were able to decide, okay, which area to join. So here we ended up having 4 teams joining this area, 6 teams joining that area, and this was decided by people in the breakout rooms where they were discussing in a team, okay, this sounds more attractive, let's go there. I believe there is some interesting use cases that we might develop in the future, and so on and so forth. And the same related to engineering managers and scrum masters, so they were also able to join based on their decision. Another story I know is from Czech company called Avast. I don't know, do we have any Avast folks in the rooms? Okay. Is it true? Okay, so last year when I was at the last conference in Warsaw, there were folks from Avast and they were describing the self-design they did. I think it was about 12 teams, right, scope?
Yeah, 120 people.
Yeah, so it was done even on such a scale. And if you know some Avast folks in the local community, you can probably reach out to them to learn more. So yeah, ending up, there are some facts from the industry about how engagement affects the quality and the value delivery. Definitely there is a decrease usually in quality rate when there is a higher engagement. There is usually, I'm not sure this is only about software companies, let me be honest, but yeah, according to Gallup, the companies with high engagement rates tend to see 21% higher profitability than the ones with the actively disengaged employees on board. And as for what I've seen, I think that first of all, ability to choose whom to work with positively affects your sense of autonomy, because you know these folks, you decided to work with them, you haven't been assigned to work with them, so you already have more trust, and usually the passing the storming phase takes short time. Second of all, being able to choose what feature or goals to pursue positively affects purpose and mastery, because you can take into account not only the goal and how interesting it sounds, but also what technologies will be used to achieve that goal. And last but not the least, self-design teams have stronger sense of ownership. So whenever something goes wrong with the product, in production, for example, these people are usually more likely to go and fix it and to take care of it without just saying that we'll take care of that another day. Yeah, and members of self-design teams are more likely to have cross-functional education happening within the team, but this depends on whether this is your goal or not. And yeah, self-design teams are usually much closer to the thing that I at least see as an ideal state of the team where people collaborate, both in terms of engineering practices, in terms of knowledge sharing, and where business and product also collaborates quite closely, like here where engineers are collaborating with the product owner on the value proposition canvas for their product. That's it. Any questions?
We have time for like 3 questions, and we're running into open space, so anybody who wants to go to open space, feel free, but there's a lot to ask about, so go ahead.
There were 2 hands, I think. Yeah. 1 hand here.
I think that, to enable self-organized team to self-design, sometimes it depends on the maturity, because I've seen people can take or run the teams that have an easier problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a comment.
Yeah, there is a comment that ability to have self-organized or self-designed teams heavily depends on the maturity of people you have in the company, and I totally agree with that. But I think this is like, of course, all companies have some legacy, not only in terms of like architecture and code, but also in terms of like workforce they've inherited from the previous structure. But I think the maturity and, okay, hates assigning this word to people, but quality of people you have is the thing that can be significantly improved by the hiring practices you apply to the company, like by adding some things like importance of cultural fit when hiring people. By, for example, when we were hiring for PandaDoc, when we were growing from 12 to 48 teams in 2.5 years, only by hiring, without outsourcing, without all that stuff, we very soon understood that people who are coming from outsourcing companies, they fail to pass the cultural fit interview because they don't care about the product we are creating, they don't care about the end user problems and pains they are facing. And we then adjusted our pipeline for hiring to decrease the amount of outsourcing folks passing to the later stages of the interview. And this is only one example. Another thing we did is a so-called engineering onboarding. So the whole company works in 2-week sprints. It's a single sprint cadence for the whole organization. And when the new people were joining, we were bringing them aboard on the first day of the sprint. And throughout that sprint, we were combining them in a team where they also got some tasks to work. So they were both getting onboarded and doing some tasks during these 2 weeks. And they were also expected to showcase something at the sprint review in the end of the sprint. So that way, during the onboarding stage, they were also experiencing what it is like to work at PandaDoc, what will be expected from us. And there were at least 3 cases when after 2 weeks, people said, well, I think this is not the right place for me, I will probably go. So, and for us, it was a positive scenario, not a negative scenario. But thank you for your comments. Hand here, yes?
I have such a question. So when we are going to have such a workshop to self-design squad, whom we are inviting for this workshop? Are these already predefined some kind of candidates who can be specialists for the products to which we want to self-design the squad? Or how we are choosing people to do this workshop with?
Mm-hmm.
This one question, and I will add in the second question.
Okay, so the question is, how do we choose whom to invite to the self-design workshop when we decide to run one? The scenario you described, when we are creating a squad to address some specific problem and we invite only people who are probably suitable for that task, is likely, but at the same time, I think it's not a real self-design because you're cherry-picking people from various teams to create one new team. What I was talking about is more like, for example, taking 4 teams that we are not happy with for some reason, bringing these 4 teams together so that they form new 4 teams in a different, with a different set of people that will be more suitable for the challenges we're solving.
Okay, then my second question here. So does not then these people feel to be somehow manipulated, and how that this affects their autonomy and
yeah, so the question is whether these people do not feel being manipulated and being...
If we gather squad members from 4 different teams, how they feel, or are not they feeling that they are manipulated to go now and self-design yourself? Okay,
I understand. So yeah, if you fail to sell them the importance of that change, why this is important, as I said in the first step, then yeah, they will probably feel manipulated, and most likely they will end up choosing the same team members they had before. And if we don't have a strong reason to conduct this workshop, we will have no logical arguments to make them change or revise the structure of the teams. This is why, like the business who organizes this workshop needs to have a strong reason why we are doing this. I must say that majority of those teams that we formed at PandaDoc, they are existing nowadays still, so they're existing 2.5 years later, and we don't reorganize them that much. But we sometimes let them choose what work to take. For example, to move between requirement areas, join different requirement area as a team, and work on a different type of business tasks. And this is also part of the self-design definition. There was one more question, okay? There was, I think you had the very first hand, sorry, so it's your turn.
So how do you balance the needs for the work and the teams versus the individual's preference to do the work? So I'm thinking there's a misbalance between the two teams. Is there a strong preference for all the teams to do one type of work versus something that needs to be done, but maybe no one wants to do that one?
Well, that's quite easy because we have a product owner who defines the priority for the overall backlog, and like we have a priority, and in case this is the most important work but nobody volunteers for that, which is rarely a case, only with bugs sometimes, like we don't move forward until this work is taken care of. With bugs it's a little bit different. With bugs, whenever we spend like, I don't know, 5 minutes and nobody volunteers for that, we just go to random.org and decide a team which will pick this bug.